climate justice group. We hope, I'd like to welcome you to what we hope will be the first of a series of discussions working out how Manchester Art Gallery can support climate justice. We'll hear from members of the climate justice group, each of whom will speak for about 5 minutes of their thoughts to introduce themselves, who we are as a group, and open up the group's collective thinking to a wider audience and more publicly. We're a friendly, informal and inclusive group, so please feel free to share any thoughts, reflections or comments in the chat box. We might not have time to go back to all the chats during the event, but we'll certainly revisit them afterwards and get back to you on your thoughts. But there will be breakout groups later in the event for you all to put your thoughts through. The event will be recorded, but only in speaker view, and the breakout rooms will only be recorded in audio. We'll share the recording of the event online, but not the breakout rooms that later on. We want to learn from the event, as I said, hopefully the first of many, and the recordings will help with that. The group has decided to dedicate this event to the memory of climate and social justice campaigner Deyika Nzeribe. He's the late Manchester-born climate justice activist. Deyika was a leading member of the Green Party in Manchester, an activist, a writer and a poet. Among many of his activities, he undertook the role of chair of the Manchester Green Party, was the Green Party candidate for Greater Manchester mayoral elections, a key member of Greens of Colour and Southern Voices. Deyika remains an inspiration to many people, and we welcome his brother, Nzeribe, who is participating with us in this event today. And I'd like to pass over to Claire now, who's going to start off with the first of the sessions.
Thanks, Bev. Great, welcome. Thank you for that. And hi, everyone. I'm Claire, and I'm a curator at the gallery and a proud member of the Climate Justice Group. I just wanted to start by sharing a brief bit of background about how the group came together, some key areas that we've agreed on so far to focus on and expand as we work together, and also how this relates to some wider thinking at Manchester Art Gallery. So just to start with a little bit of context, at the gallery at the moment, even though obviously we're not physically there right now and haven't been for a while, we're in the process of rethinking some of the gallery displays that largely haven't changed for quite some time. And this rethink involves exploring how we work with and use the public collection that's owned by the people of Manchester to tell relevant stories about lived experience in the 21st century. But it's also about how this happens, about exploring processes, ways of working and decision-making, and how people use the gallery. The climate emergency was one of the areas that was identified by members of the gallery team as a priority area for this rethink. Also, during 2019, when physical get-togethers were possible, we opened Studio One as a free bookable space for not-for-profit groups to use. And until COVID came along, this was being really well used by lots of groups, including lots of climate action groups. The Climate Justice Group that you'll be meeting this evening is a collective that's grown from a need and a desire to connect the gallery more with existing activity in the city and more widely as well, and from a growing knowledge of people and groups who are already doing amazing things, some of whom you're going to meet tonight. We had to start meeting online, of course, and we've been meeting regularly since July. We're a group of gallery staff, activists and artists. So we're working to use the resources of the gallery in the city, people, knowledge, art, imagination, space, online and physical, and a publicly owned collection. And our thinking so far has really been connected with 4 key areas. History. How do we understand history and where we are now? Why are we in a climate emergency? The future. What do we want this to look like? Scrutiny. looking closely, understanding power, how decisions are made, and how collectively people might affect change. And care and well-being, acknowledging that this can be difficult stuff to deal with, and creating positive ways of working together. And obviously each of these areas is absolutely massive. So, you know, we've got lots of work to do. And our aim over the coming months is to rethink a gallery space at the gallery dedicated to climate justice, and work out together and with others how this can be actively used on an ongoing, evolving basis. And we want to open up some of the ideas and thinking with you all this evening. We hope, as Bev said, that there'll be loads more opportunities like this, and that we can continue to join up with others in the city and elsewhere. And I'm sure that things that get raised and discussed will contribute to the processes I've talked about. Just one other thing to finish with, just a little story about something I found out recently about the gallery and its history. Some of you might know this already, but I didn't. So I was part of another group activity in the summer, an online event that had been organised by another arts organisation, when I found out that the phrase acid rain was coined by Robert Angus Smith in Manchester in 1872, while he was working in the chemistry lab in the basement of the Royal Manchester Institution. At the time, he was investigating acid rain and atmospheric pollution coming from industrialisation. The Royal Manchester Institution was, of course, what later became Manchester Art Gallery. Smith wrote a book called Air and Rain, The Beginnings of a Chemical Climatology, and through his research, he discovered the acid rain of northern British cities, which came, of course, from burning coal. So this little tiny bit of historical knowledge that I gained through a collective activity with others shows that the environmental effects of growing industry were already being investigated, of course, in the mid-19th century in the centre of the city, even while there was this drive for Manchester to industrialise and grow, which seems massively contradictory, doesn't it? But also perhaps quite relevant to today as well. And sometimes, isn't it surprising what you don't know about history and even about the place that you work? So I think that's all I'm going to say for now. It's probably a lot to pack into a few minutes. And I'm going to hand over now to Janet, who's the next person to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. I'm Janet Boston, and I'm Curator of Craft and Design at Manchester Art Gallery. And there are so many issues to explore, but I just wanted to focus on one particularly relevant to my job at the gallery, and that is the sourcing of materials in a socially and environmentally responsible way. And an artist who really exemplifies this, I think, is Claire Malet. So I've just recorded a short audio presentation to tell you about her work. So I'd like to just play that for you now. Award-winning sculptor and metalsmith Claire Malet works in rural Herefordshire. Her work is inspired by the natural world and the relationship of human beings within it. This piece, Ridge Vessel, is inspired by wintry trees she can see from her studio. The network of lines of the bare branches and the fiery red gold of their last few leaves. The work's made from a recycled steel can, repeatedly heated and hammered into a delicate pierced form with flashes of fiery red gold leaf inside. Malet seeks to make her work as responsibly as possible and uses recycled and found materials whenever she can. She's a signatory to the objectives of Culture Declares Emergency, a powerful emerging network of creative practitioners and organisations. The precious metals she uses are ethically sourced. She only uses recycled silver and fair trade certified, conflict-free certified gold. Fair trade aims to reduce poverty through fairer trade. Gold mining is dangerous for both people and the environment. Fair trade gold has strict requirements on health and safety, handling of chemicals, and environmental responsibilities. Fair trade works exclusively with small-scale gold miners. Fair trade operates in Peru, Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania. Children are not permitted to work in fair trade gold mines, and the profit from fair trade gold, known as the premium, is spent within producer communities. The profits can never be used to support armed groups. Fair trade gold carries a certificate of traceability to a specific mine. Apologies, sorry, I've muted myself accidentally there. I hope you enjoyed Claire Malet's beautiful work, and I would like to hand over now to our next participant, Jane Lawson.
Thanks, Janet, for that. Hope everyone can see and hear me all right. Do let me know otherwise. So my name is Jane Lawson. I'm an artist based in Manchester. I've got a particular interest in fungus and in diagrams. And today I'm going to talk briefly about a statuette of the Buddha that is from the art gallery collection, which I am just going to show you imminently. Not quite as imminently as I thought, but still very imminently. Here we go. So this is a statuette of the Buddha touching the earth. And the story goes that, oops, didn't mean to do that. The story goes that as the Buddha meditated under the Bodhi tree, the Buddha to be, I should say, seeking enlightenment, he was assailed by a figure called Mara, who represents all the forces that hold us back. Mara tried to deter him with threats and with temptations and with doubt, finally saying, "Who are you to think that you can become enlightened?" And in response, the Buddha to be touched the earth, which is the gesture that you see in this statue, calling forth the earth goddess to bear witness as to whether or not he merited enlightenment. And she said that, yes, he did. Then in another tradition, that of the Celts, who arrived in the British Isles, this will work in a minute, who arrived in the British Isles about 2,500 years ago. The 1st of February is a festival of Imbolc, which is the coming of spring. It's a time of potential and of renewal, of realizing hidden potentials, and of casting out old paradigms and old life ways that do not serve us. The late great Ursula Le Guin in 2014 said, "We live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable. So did the divine right of kings." So the earth is waking up. It's been lying dormant over the winter, but life is coming through. We can see that when we look out of our window. We can see the snowdrops coming through. 1 to 5% of the soil's weight is alive, and 1/4 of all animal species on Earth live in or under the ground. Not only that, but nearly 80% of the carbon in terrestrial ecosystems is stored in soil, and it is held in and by, a lot of it, around about 27%, is held in and by glomalin, which is a soil glue, which is secreted by mycorrhizal fungi. Not only does it hold carbon, it also improves soil structure and it reduces erosion. So the earth with a small e is something we need to take care of. But it's estimated that with business as usual, we have between 50 and 100 harvests left. So recognizing our earthbound nature, we need to start putting organic matter rather than toxic waste into the soil and stop taking loads of stuff out of it as well. Regenerative agriculture does seem to provide a way of drawing carbon down out of the atmosphere and back into the ground. And it does require a new paradigm, less ploughing, less use of synthetic fertilizers, and less meat consumption for a start. And this PDF, this mind map, will be circulated after the session for anyone who'd like to peruse at more leisure. And there are, for anyone interested in finding practical steps that can be taken, these are all clickable links as well, so you can find out more about drawing carbon out of the atmosphere and into the soil. So we're coming up to COP26 this autumn in Glasgow, when countries will be reporting on how they're doing in meeting the commitments to reduce carbon that made in Paris in 2015, and in theory, sorry, not in 2015, in 2015, and in theory ratcheting up those commitments and taking them further. But I'm going to give the last word to the scholar Donna Haraway, who suggests that we use the term Cthulhucene rather than Anthropocene, saying human beings are not the only important actors in the Cthulhucene, with all other beings able simply to react. The order is reknitted. Human beings are with and of the earth, and the biotic and abiotic powers of this earth are the main story. The unfinished Cthulhucene must collect up the trash of the Anthropocene, the exterminism of the Capitalocene, and chipping and shredding and layering like a mad gardener, make a much hotter compost pile of still possible pasts, presents, and futures. Thank you for listening, and I'm going to hand over to my colleague Rabia.
Hi everyone, my name's Rabia. I'm an artist at Manchester Art Gallery and I sit on the Manchester Climate Change Youth Board. And whilst we're waiting, I introduce myself in my video, and my video explores a spoken word video on intersectionality within climate justice. And here we are, this is the video.
Thank you, Jane, for your talk on soil and earth and new beginnings and change. Hi everyone, my name's Rabia. I work as an artist, recently joining the Climate Justice Group, an activist, and I'm also a member of Manchester Climate Change Youth Board. In this next video, you will see a spoken word video on intersectionality, followed by a preview of Manchester Climate Change Youth Board's Manifesto, which we hope to launch this summer. Thank you. As we see the intricacies and the delicate bees disappear, who are we? As we see the intricacies, the many levels of you and me, the intersectionality, social injustice flees, who are we? As we see the intricacies, Europe thrown in a freeze, the young suffer the elders' deeds, who are we? As we see the intricacies, born unequally, let us take for what we can, now bring me your tea, who are we? As we see the intricacies, decolonize your galleries, understanding our history, who are we? As we see the intricacies, Rashford school meal breeze, Boris falling to his knees, food security, food sovereignty, the global south, you know who I mean, who are we? As we see the intricacies, Bangladesh under seas, migration, how we run and we flee, land, sea, Arctic and freeze, who are we? As we see flooding frequently, extinct species are we, the mirror to our own realities. Work together can we to shape the future for you and for me. Thank you for watching my spoken word video called As We See. I will now share a preview on Manchester Climate Change Youth Board's Manifesto, which we hope to launch this summer. Thank you for your time. I will now hand over to Hannah.
Hello everyone. It's quite a selection box, isn't it? Can everyone hear me all right? Excellent. And can you see this rather grubby little picture I've got up on the screen here? Well, this is Naismith's works at Patricroft. At this point, the first railway in the country crosses the first canal. When thinking about our question, what can Manchester Art Gallery do to support climate justice? I just can't get this one out of my head. This is a reproduction of an engraving of an industrial site at Patricroft, to the west of Manchester. I've had a look on Google Maps and it's where the Naismith Business Park is now. This is where Naismith's steam hammer was made. The steam hammer was a pivotal invention of the Industrial Revolution. Without it, iron could not be shaped into all the components needed. It transformed making iron goods from a craft to a vast industry. Mass production of parts for machines, ships, and guns fed into international trade, and the associated wars begun to defend that trade. This site in Patricroft, Lancashire, could compete with Ironbridge in Shropshire as one of the birthplaces of the Industrial Revolution. Now I want to step back from what I just said and examine how I said it. I am automatically reaching for words like pivotal, transformed, compete. I am, while trying to provide you with entirely neutral information, framing this picture in the way that it has been framed before, as the site of a heroic endeavour. Look at the frame. Can you see it there? It's got the title written on it all carefully in handwriting. And not just the title, it's got the addition. At this point, the first railway in the country crosses the first canal. It's the Bridgewater Canal, built to move coal from the Duke of Bridgewater's mine, crossed by the first passenger railway in the country. Don't want to offend people from the northeast. The Liverpool to Manchester line opened in 1830. I want to ask if this is the right way to approach such an image, to be very concerned with firsts. This way of thinking about things is absolutely ingrained in our behaviour in the world of museums and galleries. This print was mounted as part of displays in an educational museum in Ancoats in North Manchester called the Horsfall Museum. Manchester Art Gallery inherited its collections and now looks after them. I think it was mounted about 100 years ago. The steam hammer was already old technology by then. Manchester had its Horsfall Museum in a particularly poor and crowded district to try to beautify the lives of the victims of the industrial system. And even to these people, to those whose growth was stunted by overwork at a young age, who lived shorter lives because the air was not clean, whose fortune depended on the vagaries of trade, even to these people, this birthplace of the Industrial Revolution site is held up as a source of local pride. And here am I 100 years later carrying on this talk. Pivotal, transformed, first, compete. And I don't know why. No matter how much we in museums and galleries try to present things with neutrality, it can never be so. Nothing is neutral, nor should it be. I love a bit of local pride. Industrial heritage is part of that for me. What I want us to be clear on is that this site in Patricroft was not an inevitability. It did not have to have happened that the steam hammer was developed where the first canal and the first railway met. It isn't a fateful meeting of the gods. It could have been different. This thought leads us on to think about our situation with climate change. It was like this. It didn't have to be. It is like this. It doesn't have to be. I'm sorry to be a bit lectury at you. I feel quite strongly about this one. Thank you for listening and looking at this work from our Horsfall collection. Now I'm going to hand you over to Kooj.
Muted. Sorry about that, I was muted. Okay, thank you for that, Hannah. My name's Kooj Chuhan. I'm a filmmaker, a digital artist, and I've been active for many years in progressing racial justice and climate justice. I'm also the director of Crossing Footprints. When we think of global warming and ecocide, one question which I think is quite important is how did we get here? They seem like recent developments, but they've been here they've been a long time in development. And I think that we have to see through the false values and the destructive assumptions that have been blinding us for many decades and that have created illusions that are well past time for us to try and remove from our collective psychologies. I think that Manchester Art Gallery can have a strong role in generating understanding of the current and the historical causes of climate change by reinterpreting its collection through this prism that we're starting to call climate justice. And to me, the cause of the climate crisis go back to colonialism. They go back to the extraction, which is continuing now, the extraction of resources from countries which for decades, for a long time, have been used to fuel what was the Industrial Revolution, which then led to the industries which were based on unsustainable values, which, like a cancer, have not become visible until relatively recently. And I think that history needs to be rewritten to bring together industrial development, slavery, colonial exploitation, and environmental destruction as a single process, albeit with different facets. I just want to look at just one interesting example from the gallery's collections. It's a lithographic print. I'm just going to bring it up now. It's a lithographic print titled Empire Marketing by Hugh Williams around the late 20s, early 30s. So that's kind of what the entire print looks like. I'm hoping to make a short, well, I will be making a short film fairly soon, which deconstructs the very explicit values that are inherent within the picture. And I think that's going to be spread out through the gallery's social media channels. It's obviously a picture, imbued with nationalism. It suggests a very large economic scale. It's got a lot of fossil fuel burning transport in it. There's a very strong pride in the idea of industrial expansion that you can see in those days, and it's a very clinically clean kind of landscape. Okay, it's presented on a flag, but it very much depicts a sense of hope through industry. And interesting, we can see a few different close-ups of it. If that's the top left, and then that's the top right, so you can kind of see the different aspects of it. A lot of stuff being burnt, a lot of smoke, and each stripe in the flag is actually a road extending to a colony. So if you read clockwise from the top left road, it actually says from Newfoundland. You can see that there, and Newfoundland is an island just off what's now, and it's part of Canada now. In 1583, it became England's first possession in North America, and it was one of the first, is one of the earliest permanent English colonies in what they used to call the New World. By the 1930s, it was a dominion of the British Empire, and that process came hand in hand with the extinction of the Beothuk people, the Beothuk nation, which was living there in the past. So they are now extinct, and so is their language. So I mentioned that as the first example. We've got a very similar kind of pattern developing. So at the top of that flag, the British flag, we've got the Irish Free State, which at the time was also Dominion before it became independent into what's now called Ireland. On the top right-hand side, we've got India and Ceylon, which at the time were two separate British Crown colonies. Incidentally, India was massive at the time. That included Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Burma, so it's a vast area. On the right of the flag, we see from Australia. Australia was a settler colony at the time. It is still a settler colony because it's never become independent, and it was a kind of dominion. It was the conglomeration at that time of 6 separate states, which then became a federated country called Australia. If we go down to the bottom right hand of the Union Jack, we see from New Zealand and the South Seas written on the signpost. And again, New Zealand was an ex-dominion and is still a settler colony. If we go to the very south part of the flag, it says from South Africa, which again was a settler colony. In that case, it had a minority white population, and it has now become independent. Then at the bottom left, it says from West Africa, which is now West Africa, I think, was a reference to what was originally called British West Africa, which was a colonial entity, which encompassed the Gambia, Sierra Leone, Ghana, and Nigeria. And on the left of the Union Jack, it says from Canada, which again is a settler colony, never became independent, and was a dominion at that time of the British Empire. Now, each of these previously sustainable sets of civilizations that were in those regions of the world were brutally and abusively recoded into a global industrial system, which has led to what we now recognize as being the climate crisis. And I think it's important to say, I mean, there's a lot more I could say about that. I've only got a short amount of time. So one thing that is very clear is that we may all be in the same seas, but we're not in the same boats, with countries from the global south contributing the least towards global warming, but receiving its worst effects. And I think that this image really feels in many ways like a precursor to what the Prime Minister Harold Wilson, roughly 30 years later, came to call the white heat of a technological revolution, as what he saw as the continuing way forward for Britain. And I do find the phrase white heat having a different signage today. And I think that the best way out of this mess is really not straightforward, of course, but I think we do at least have to stop burying our heads in the sand when we are talking about how we actually have got there. So that's me done. Thanks for listening. Next on is Adam Peirce from the Climate Emergency Manchester.
Hi there. So yeah, I've come here today as part of the core group from Climate Emergency Manchester, who got involved in the Manchester Art Gallery Climate Justice Group a while back, and I decided to stick around as working with artists isn't what I normally do, or art galleries for that matter, and I wanted to learn more, get inspiration from them. I work full-time at the university trying to help small businesses with more sustainable uses of plastics, so this is quite a contrast from my day job. CEM, so Climate Emergency Manchester, was started by a couple of my colleagues, Mark and Callum, back in spring 2019, as a way to petition the council to declare a climate emergency. It did just that in 2019 in July. I joined in early 2020, and we are now up to 7 in the core group, with plenty more close supporters, allies, and interested bystanders across the city, including some in this group. We've been discussing fairly recently about what is the purpose of our group, and have come up with a couple of aims. Our first aim is more inward-looking, to thrive as active citizens in a broader ecosystem of resistance. We feel that it's important to sustain ourselves and support each other, to grow in numbers, in skills, in relationships, and to ensure the conditions under which we continue to thrive are also sustained, for us as individuals within the group, for the group as a whole, and its close supporters and allies. Using the power that this thriving gives us, the skills, the knowledge, the connections, the credibility, we aim to put this consistent and substantial pressure on Manchester City Council and other local centres of political, economic and cultural influence, so that Manchester's response to the climate change is rapid, radical, and do not harm the poorest and marginalised in society. We work on a number of projects, some more developmental, related to the first aim. This might be around how we function as a group, how to stay resilient and continue to learn, develop as individuals or as a group. We've done work led by Mark on a climate citizenship toolkit, and more recently, Marion and Pooja produced a student guide to the climate crisis. We also produce a range of research reports and briefing papers, both looking at the response from the Council to Climate Emergency Declaration, as well as looking further afield into the Greater Manchester Combined Authority and to the UK core cities. We recently finished our second petition related to getting a dedicated committee to the scrutiny of climate emergency. And we believe the governance is currently inadequate there. The city is far from being on track with its zero carbon targets. Our petition got over 1,700 signatures from across the city. We think that's the most a citizen group has got using the official democratic processes of the council. This has resulted in Chloe presenting to the Resources and Governance Scrutiny Committee next Tuesday to ask them to recommend the issues passed up to full council, who have the power to create this 7th scrutiny committee. I think we're also the first members of the public to be participating in a scrutiny committee since lockdown began. I got involved in this group as I think, individual creativity from a diverse range of people is key to effecting rapid and radical change. That could be through reinterpreting an existing message or object and sharing how it's made you feel, or sharing how it's inspired you to create something new. This is a crucial part of what we did for the petition, where we created a lot of different materials to ask the public to join us. It was a mixture of materials, videos, posters, flyers, signature sheets, sandwich boards, and beer mats, and lots of written blog posts. I thought I'd share with you the beer mats, as they mean something to me. So here you go, if you can see. I'm a home brewer and wanted to try to engage customers of local independent shops, bars and pubs when they were going open during the summer. I wanted to show that supporting climate action can mean many different things to different people, and you can even do it whilst enjoying a beer. It's been really interesting to hear about how the others in the group have approached this event, and I hope we continue to learn, develop and inspire each other to understand what climate justice for the art gallery and how it can help, and as well as how to promote it further, change within the city. I'll put our socials within the Zoom box chat, and I'll now hand over to Jackie.
Thank you very much, Adam. My name's Jackie Haynes, and I'm part of Terrace Square Artist Project, or TSAP, which was set up in 2018 in our neighbourhood of green alleyways, close to Platt Hall in Plattfields Park in South Manchester. Platt Hall is well placed in the 3 neighbouring wards of Moss Side, Fallowfield and Rusholme as a place to discuss issues arising from the climate emergency declared by Manchester City Council in 2019. Platt Hall is also home to the Mary Gregg collection of everyday domestic objects, and was the inspiration for new artworks exhibited by TSAP in the windows of Platt Hall in summer 2020. The 19th century Noah's Ark set from the Mary Gregg collection evokes for me a contemporary reading of the flood and injustices of climate breakdown. This formed the basis of a new story with a new generation of ark animals and their year-long trek to the refuge of Platt Hall Climate Emergency Hub. The new generation were united with their 19th century ancestors at Platt Hall in TSAP summer exhibition. In the months after the exhibition, as a household bubble behind closed doors, they swapped stories and wisdom, proliferated and plotted, absorbed and debated the consequences of the climate emergency declaration. The following short film that I've made shows 4 climate emergency ambassadors, the zebra, Spotty Llama and 2 dogs, who were democratically elected by the Noah's Ark Citizens' Assembly for their tenacity and diplomacy in a crisis. They leave Platt Hall with their heads ringing with the climate emergency debates they've absorbed over the last 6 months. They stop en route for sustenance, journeying through Whitworth Park and University grounds to eventually arrive here at Manchester Art Gallery's first climate justice group event, to hear a wider conversation about global climate justice and the benefits of having a 7th scrutiny committee on climate and environment in Manchester City Council.
I would like to draw your attention to the next meeting of Manchester City Council's Resources and Governance Scrutiny Committee on the 9th of February 2021. This will feature a discussion of Climate Emergency Manchester's petition campaign for a 7th Scrutiny Committee dedicated to climate policy and implementation. In January 2021, the existing 6 scrutiny committees held meetings. We asked, 1. What was the level of scrutiny like? And 2. What did we learn about Manchester City Council's response to the climate emergency? Council finances are in an uncertain situation, but not as dire as once was predicted. Spending is still planned. This is worth remembering, if, or when, we hear that there is no money for the climate emergency. At the Resources and Governance Scrutiny Committee meeting, the Councillor for Burnage asked a question about retrofitting Manchester's existing housing stock. The query was sound, a fear that there was insufficient investment planned for the huge but necessary task of retrofitting Manchester's existing housing stock. But the key point is this question has also been raised recently in other committees. This scattered approach to policies addressing the climate crisis with the same questions briefly popping up in different meetings, rather than in one sustained forum with clear accountability, means we will remain stuck in Groundhog-esque cycles of inaction. Over at the Economy Scrutiny Committee, came an explanation that there was not enough money to carry out the planned retrofitting of existing homes to meet zero carbon targets. Shockingly, this wasn't discussed in the meeting. This is just not good enough. Imagine for a moment an agenda of devastatingly urgent climate items being discussed with the same urgency as the Communities and Equalities Scrutiny Committee agenda items were discussed. For instance, the Councillor for Fallowfield made reference to Manchester City Council's commitment to zero carbon city and how this needs to work in conjunction with its other strategies. Commitments, reports and strategies do not exist in isolation and require effective and accountable joined-up thinking. Climate breakdown is a current and future health crisis. A global pandemic is raging. Our healthcare system is in crisis and the Health Scrutiny Committee has a huge remit and tight budget to contend with. These meetings conspicuously lacked reference to the aspirations emitted by Manchester City Council in its own climate emergency declaration, despite the desire for a low-carbon city being prominently profiled across meeting reports and supplementary agenda. But we don't doubt that a 7th Scrutiny Committee dedicated to climate policy and implementation could activate the joined-up thinking so desperately in need. Daniel Headspace, reporting for Climate Emergency Manchester.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you for that presentation in short film. Good evening. My name is Emmanuela Yogolelo. I'm an artist and creative producer. I'm a global South citizen, originally from the Democratic Republic of Congo in Africa. In 2019, I started exploring climate justice activism through music and other art forms. And what I'm particularly interested in is perspectives and personal experiences of people in other parts of the world when it comes to climate change. Because I learned that although climate change is a global crisis, people experience it differently depending on which part of the world they live in. And tonight, I'd like to share with you some interpretations I've given to a picture in the collection at Manchester Art Gallery. The picture is called Hell of Copper. It is by Leon Nyaba Wadrego. But before I do that, I'd like to play a few seconds of the kind of music I'm creating in terms of my climate justice work. that track's still a work in progress. So across the African continent, there are hundreds and thousands of electronic disposable sites in towns and cities. The biggest is in Abkobloshi in Accra, the capital city of Ghana. Electronic disposable sites in Africa have been seen as an opportunity for people there to lift themselves out of poverty through jobs they create. They also have been celebrated as a platform on which humans we showcase our resourcefulness and creativity. We currently even are talking about urban mining, when gold, copper, coltan, and other minerals are being recuperated from used electronic devices. Electronic disposable sites have been one way through which many have come to learn about our responsibilities towards the environment. So I understand that people talk positively about electronic disposable sites. However, I would like, when we talk about electronic disposable sites in Africa and other global South countries, we talk too about the fact that these sites are really toxic dumping grounds and poison to the environment and people. The conditions in which people work in these sites make them sick and also destroy life around them. I'd like we talk about the salary that a person working in one of these sites gets paid. A salary which is simply human exploitation. A salary that says slavery and colonialism never ended. A salary that tells me that all that developed countries see in developing countries is cheap labor. A salary that says capitalism is the root cause of many of our problems. I'd like we consciously realize that Africa produces copper, cobalt, gold, coltan. However, in most cases, Africa consumes these only after others have exhausted them and they have become toxic. I'd like we talk too about the fact that, yes, some of the electronic waste in these sites come from local households and businesses there. However, the majority of waste that are dumped in these sites come from rich Western countries. Western countries that have better resources for a better management of their own waste. Lastly, I'd like we look at the fires in electronic disposable sites right in the middle of our towns and cities, just as we would look at fire in the Amazon, the Congo Basin, or Australia. The EU has just banned sending plastic waste to poor countries. However, the post-Brexit Britain will have to follow this policy, because Britain believes that developing countries should make the decision if plastic waste are sent or not to them, as if global South countries can in any capacity say no to a request of Britain to dump its waste on their soil. I've heard that UK could introduce a tax on plastic soon. I choose to be optimistic about all these decisions and ideas and forget that time and time again we have been let down, particularly in the global South. I choose to believe that this time global North policies and speeches will make a difference for nations where are sent to West in the global South. Thank you. Next on is Emma Greenwood from Youth Strike for Manchester. Thank you.
Thank you, that was amazing. So hi everyone, I'm Emma, I am 17 and I'm one of the coordinators at Youth Strike for Climate Manchester. So we started in February of 2019 was our first strike, which means we've officially been going for 2 years now, which is both optimistic and sad to think, because whilst climate change is on the agenda now more than I would have said it would have been 2 years ago, we've really had nothing but pledges and promises and ambitions and targets from the government with very little cemented action. So obviously in pre-COVID times, we would do, our main form of activism was striking. So once a month, we'd get young people from all across Greater Manchester and beyond together to try and make the powerless feel powerful. We'd do chants, we'd have speakers, we'd have MPs come. It was an incredible opportunity for intergenerational work between so many different groups of the community. And I think anybody who came left just feeling so inspired and so moved. Our biggest strike was September of 2019, which was a general strike for climate all across the world. It included young people, adults, workers, unionists, children like young as the age of 3. It was one of the biggest climate strikes Manchester has ever seen, with over 5,000 people coming. I can't even express in words the atmosphere that was created that day and the momentum that came after it. Unfortunately, as we all know, when at the start of 2020, the pandemic hit, which meant that our main mechanism of activism, striking, just wasn't possible anymore. Many of us are students, so we had to deal with this kind of unconventional form of education online. So it's been quite difficult to manage. But we've definitely shifted over the pandemic to how we do things. So we've done a lot of work to help ourselves learn, or rather unlearn, things that we've taken for granted. So it's things like how we best support those who are most affected by the climate crisis, to not come across as white saviourists, or how we can best work with politicians around the world to get intergenerational work. We've created lots of educational resources to help inform young people and adults in an accessible way. And we've done a lot of learning and reflecting ourselves, because activism isn't just about physical actions. It's about sitting back sometimes and looking at about how we can best use our privilege that we have as a country, where we can freely strike without persecution, but also our skin colour and so many other factors. We are hoping that eventually we can get back to striking, but we've been doing lots of incredible work like the one with the Manchester Art Gallery group to try and get more outreach into the community. We'd also like to thank every adult that has been working with us. We've been doing lots of work with so many unions and groups over the past few months who have been incredibly supportive. Due to our lack of capacity, online school is definitely something to work around, so I'm sure some parents are aware if you're trying to teach kids online, it's not the easiest. But we're learning and we're growing, and the Youth Strike Manchester has grown from 2 people at the start of February 2019 to a team of over 30 now, and it's growing more and more over lockdown. So we can't wait to get back on the streets when COVID, hopefully when it's safe to do so and COVID reduces. So yes, thank you for your support over the past 2 years, and we can't wait to continue.
Thanks, Emma. And thank you everyone for coming. Now the important bit begins. You've heard from all of us. That's an overview of our selection box of all our different approaches to our question. And now we're really looking forward to finding out from you how you might answer the question, how can Manchester Art Gallery support climate justice? But we're not going to make you all talk at once to each other. There are about 70 or 80 people here today. Instead, we're going to divide you fairly randomly into breakout rooms. I don't know if you've ever done a breakout room in Zoom before, but just hang on, and if it asks you to do it, click yes. There's going to be about 10 different rooms, because one person from the group will be in each of the rooms, and they are going to, remember everyone, they are going to press record, but only for what you're saying, not for what you look like, and we're not going to broadcast any of that. That's just so we can remember your important answers to our question. I think Claire's going to put it in the chat again. How can Manchester Art Gallery support climate justice? We've got obviously a lot of great people and a lot of resources in the form of the collection to help us, but now we need your help. There is going to be a surprise visitor in one of the rooms. I think Jackie ought to tell you about that, so it doesn't surprise you as a Zoom bomber.
Yeah, the Noah's Ark Citizens Assembly are present, and they'll appear randomly in one of the chat rooms.
So if you're wondering what's going on in the other chat rooms, don't worry, there'll be a digest emailed round to you afterwards. But if you want to just hang on, I think Meg's working on putting us all into a room. I'll see you in my room in a couple of minutes.
So welcome back, everyone. Wow, that was a great discussion. It really makes me feel positive knowing that we can work together as a collective. I know for myself, I was talking about eco-anxiety towards the end, and that's something that really plays on my mind and on my heart a lot. But knowing that we can have these conversations and hopefully take action is something that makes me carry on and continue. So I hope you found that useful as much as I did. And just on a closing note, just a massive thank you to everyone who's tuned into our event, and to everyone at Manchester Art Gallery, curators, the artists and activists who have been participating in this newly formed climate justice working group. We hope the breakout rooms provided insightful discussions and thoughts around how we can look at key next steps with Manchester Art Gallery supporting climate justice through their public collections. There will also be other events related to the gallery rethink, so do have a look out for those. We aim to digest the content from the breakout rooms and follow up with you via email in a month's time. If you would like to keep in touch, someone will now include Hannah's email in the chat box. We hope you have enjoyed our selection box of presentations this evening surrounding the key areas on understanding history, shaping the future, scrutiny, decision-making, care and well-being. We hope to see you at more events related to the gallery rethink around climate justice. Thank you to everyone who joined us today, and we hope you enjoy your evenings and you can join us soon.